All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to your Muckboots in the Capital update, small farm legislative updates for Oregon with Friends of Family Farmers. Today is May 19th, 2025. My name is Alice Morrison. I'm the co-executive director of Friends of Family Farmers, and I'm in charge of our policy work, and I will be leading this update. So today we are going to be covering, as always, priority updates for FOF's legislative priorities. We're going to talk about budget activism, the timeline for the rest of the session, and we have some stuff to share about a rulemaking advisory committee that's coming together around farm stand rules and agritourism at the DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation and Development. So some interesting stuff to share today. We'll get started with our updates on FOF's two priority areas. The first of which is our state meat inspection priority, taking the form of HB 2164. This is a bill that we have brought forward with consultation with the Department of Agriculture to request general funds for 2 FTE for inspector positions. That FTE doesn't have to be 2 humans. It could be spread over multiple positions to get good geographic coverage, to make sure that there are consistent and available inspection hours for state meat inspected facilities for processors who choose to use that program all over the state. And the fiscal totals about $275,000 per biennium. If you look at the fiscal impact statement on the Oregon Legislative Information System, you're going to see a fiscal impact for both the 25 to 27 biennium and the 27 to 29. So this bill is still where it was last week. So we had our hearing very early in February in House Ag, passed unanimously, lots of support. We're really grateful to everyone who's helped over the years prioritize meat inspection capacity for local farms in Oregon. I think we've made a lot of progress here. It was referred down to Ways and Means right after that, and it was identified just a couple weeks ago as a priority bill for the House Ag Committee co-chairs. Thank you so much to Reps Hellman Owens for their activism on this topic. And given the budget landscape, which we're going to talk about later in this update, we are very grateful for that prioritization. And we do anticipate this being assigned to the Natural Resources Subcommittee of Ways and Means, and we'll see how things go moving forward. We will definitely keep you updated on ways to get involved for reasons that will become clear in the budget update section of this presentation. Okay, so when we're talking about, actually, I should have changed this because now it is HB 3372B because it has a second amendment enrolled now. So because it has had multiple amendments enrolled and it's in its last stage, they have changed the actual demarcation for this to 3372B. So if you see that coming up, it's the same bill. But what's in the bill? The Dash 5 amendment replaced the placeholder text during the House section of this bill's path. Essentially, right now, I know we've covered this before, but just in case someone's watching one of these recordings and is not familiar with the issue, right now, you are allowed to water a half acre for any purpose you like from your domestic well without a water right, with no gallon limitation. So, but you are not allowed to do any commercial growing on that half acre. So this bill would amend that to allow you to use your half acre irrigated area for commercial or personal growing in part or whole, whatever proportion you decide, but impose a 3,000 gallon a day limit on the irrigation of that half acre regardless of use. And that irrigation for the half acre plus your currently allowed commercial exemption. You're currently allowed to use 5,000 gallons per day for any single commercial or industrial use, as long as that commercial or industrial use is not irrigated agriculture. The irrigation of the half acre plus whatever else you use for commercial use has to equal 5,000. So no additional usage, only within the current gallon numbers and footprint that are in the law, but allowing for a small amount of commercial gardening. Cannabis is excluded. Just bringing you through the process here with different amendments that were introduced. Cannabis is excluded, but if you are a licensed industrial hemp grower, you are allowed to use this as a acceptable source of water for the permits associated with that crop. The Lubguama, the Lower Umatilla Basin Groundwater Management Area, which is currently undergoing a decades-long battle with nitrate contamination and a pretty extensive public campaign to help mitigate that water quality crisis that has been going on for many years and has federal involvement. The state's very aware of it. That entire basin was excluded from use of this exemption in the Dash 11 amendment, which was adopted in the Senate committee, in the House committee, no, the Senate committee, sorry. Um, and that is excluded until January of 2028, where that exclusion will sunset, and they can, at any point therein, folks can come back and say, hey, where we are with the Lubguama is not conducive to use of this exemption. We need to make this permanent, or they can let the sunset expire in January 2028. And that's the most recent amendment. So the hearing was conducted in the House Ag Committee on April 7th, work session on April 9th, passed out of that committee, passed with bipartisan support in the House floor vote. It was assigned to the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and Wildfire. There was a first hearing in that committee on April 29th. And then the second committee, the second public hearing in the second chamber happened on May 8th. The Dash 11 amendment was adopted, and during that public hearing and possible work session, they took a vote and passed that out of the Senate Natural Resources Committee. And moving forward, their Senate floor vote, the third reading is scheduled to happen tomorrow, May 20th. So that is the soonest that the floor vote will happen. Then it does, because there was a new amendment adopted in the Senate, it must return to the House for a concurrence vote. It doesn't go back to a committee, just goes to another floor vote. And we have been working to make sure that folks understand that this is the same bill that they've already voted on. It is still a good bill. It is still a good idea. And the only change is that it does not apply in the Lower Umatilla Basin groundwater management area until the sunset expires. Then it will go to the governor for signature, or here in Oregon, we don't have a pocket veto. If the governor chooses not to sign it, it just takes effect. And it does not have an emergency clause, so this bill would take effect on January 1st, 2026 when it passes. So keep that in mind, everyone out there, that this is not something that takes effect immediately. Although in the hearing in the Senate Natural Resources Committee, OWRD did say that if this bill passes, this will not be an enforcement priority for them between now and January, and that they would be working with partners like the advocates on this bill, aka us, to spread the word about the new rules and what that means going forward. Okay, so now that we've heard an update on our FOF priorities, we are going to talk more about the budget. Okay, so FOF's budget priorities have been out there for a while. Of course, our number one priority is the bill that we brought forward about state meat inspection staffing. So that bill, HB 2164, is at the top of our list. And then we are also very, very, very supportive of the following bills as well, including HB 2979, which is a renewal of the Food System Resilience Grants funds, which were housed at Oregon Community Food Systems Network, OCFSN, for farmers and ranchers, as well as for food hubs. And then at the Oregon Farmers Market Association for farmers markets for both climate resilience and like drought and extreme weather resilience, as well as SNAP technical assistance. So to increase SNAP availability at farmers markets and make sure that folks had all of the software and staff training and record keeping to make sure that they're doing all of those things the way that they need to be done. Then, of course, we are also very supportive of SB 611, Food for All, Double Up Food Bucks, Farm to School, and the Oregon Ag Heritage Program. So all of these things are in our budget letter, which went out last week or week before. And yes, so we did release it. It's not will be releasing. Should have updated that. We already did. We sent those letters to the chairs of Ways and Means and leadership, and have been having meetings regarding that letter to just make it clear that we think that these are the ecosystem approaches that need to happen in order to strengthen our community food system and have small farms thrive here in Oregon. Thank you to the 140 organizations and farms and community partners who signed on to that budget letter. We sent that out to lawmakers last week and have been meeting with them on the impact of it and the prioritization of those programs that we talked about on the previous slide. So thank you to everyone who answered the call when we put that out. And now we get to talk about the revenue forecast. So we hit a major milestone in the legislative session calendar. Yes, not yesterday. Last week, last Wednesday on May 14th, the revenue forecast, it's the final revenue forecast of the legislative session, and this is the revenue forecast that um the legislature will be using to balance the budget and do their budget reconciliation on. That revenue forecast came out last week and it was not great. So, it showed about a $755 million deficit. So lower than they hoped. That is, not what we were hoping for. And it will lead to a much more conservative budget outlook going forward. There were also some things in there that indicated that there was about, according to this report, about a 25% chance of a recession, as well as some mixed feelings on whether or not federal focuses on trade and tariffs were going to have negative or positive impacts based on where those things land. And there were some I don't know, there's a lot of uncertainty about how all of that is going to play out. And it seemed to me like some of the analysis that was coming out after this budget forecast, the revenue forecast was released, was that we're kind of, the state might be doing a kind of a wait and see approach, is the impression that I got from the things that I read. That there could be more negative effects from federal choices at that level. But if they choose to ease up on some of those trade things that have been going on, there might be a positive effect. And so I have been told that new programs are all but off the table. And if that's something that we're supporting, which it is with Food for All, that we will need to be making that case very, very strongly. And that renewal could be tricky for existing programs. So that's why we are kind of turning up the heat on budget advocacy for the remainder of the session. And might have to think about short session in 2026 and or a special session. There has been talk about there being a special session in September of this year when some of the trade things are playing out and the state may be more conservative during this legislative session and pass some additional funding in the special session in the fall. These are all things that have been floating around and things to consider as we're moving forward. But all of this adds up to, we need to be very aggressive with our support of the things that we think deserve funding right now. This is the time to be very, very clear about what resources we need as a community food system to sustain ourselves, to have market access and availability to the public, and make sure that we can continue to thrive in this uncertain time. So that's why we released the budget letter. That's why we're doing that activism. And I would encourage anyone on the call who's thinking, what should I do right now? You should talk about funding. This is the time. Okay, so that is where we are with the revenue forecast. And then looking ahead, we only have a couple more hurdles to jump over here in the session. So we got through our work session, our second chamber work session scheduling deadline earlier this month. The revenue forecast happened last week. And then at the end of this week, we are looking at the second chamber committee vote deadline. So FOF's priorities have already gotten through that pace, but there are many policy bills that are still in their second chamber committee. And if you're in a policy committee, so you're not in rules or revenue or ways and means, if you're in a policy committee, those votes need to be done. The work sessions need to be complete by the end of the day on May 23rd. So that is putting a little bit of a crunch on the timeline here. So you'll see a lot of that stuff coming out this week. And then also considering that June 18th is the target sine die, which is the end of the session, the budget reconciliation bill, we think, will come out probably in early June, like the first week of June, after or perhaps the last week of May, depending. I know Ways and Means are really going for it right now. And you will also be seeing between now and that budget reconciliation bill, you're going to see things assigned to subcommittees in Ways and Means. And if something is assigned to a subcommittee in Ways and Means, that means it has a very, very high chance of passage, because they would just not assign it to a subcommittee if it wasn't going to go anywhere. So that's a very good sign. And also, you will see agency budgets moving through the process. Those all do have bill numbers associated with them as well. You can check out our website for the ones that we're following. And that process will begin chugging along pretty quickly at this point, because everything needs to be done by the sine die. I know they're still targeting June 18th. I haven't heard that the target is shifting yet, but they do constitutionally have until the end of the month on June 29th is when they absolutely need to be done. So that's what I have for you for the legislature right now, and kind of the focuses that we're looking at and what's going on. But I wanted to like kind of take a step back and revisit something that we discussed earlier this session. There was a proposal that was brought forward. I believe it was HB 3133. We can fact check that. But a proposal brought forward by the Oregon Property Owners Association, that was in regard to changing some rules around farm stands on EFU and farm forest zone land. FOF participated in a legislative working group around this. And the conclusion of that working group, which was convened by both the governor's office and the co-chairs of the House Agriculture Committee, the conclusion was that we could make a lot of the changes that people are wanting to see in a rulemaking through the Department of Land Conservation and Development, DLCD. So I was appointed to that rulemaking committee. There was an application that was open and folks applied, and there were 20 members appointed to this rulemaking committee. And the rulemaking advisory committee is going to be meeting 4 times. The first meeting was on Friday of last week. And this is one data point in DLCDs and LCDC, which is a slightly, I don't remember what the I don't remember what the difference in the acronyms are, but they're different bodies that have different responsibilities. And DLCD is a state agency, and it is responsible for enforcing land use and things like that. So this is very relevant to a lot of the folks that we serve. So I wanted to give you an update on where we are with that. And this committee, all of the members therein, being an official appointed member of the Rulemaking Advisory Committee, means that I have the ability to speak in these meetings on the behalf of FOF and the farmers that we represent, to make arguments for things that they want and against things that they don't. And I have the ability to submit comments to DLCD to influence their rewriting of the rules. So we're not changing anything in statute, but the way that it's applied. And something that they emphasize to us is that they want proposed language from the folks on the rulemaking advisory committee. And the committee is made up of both farm stand operators, so farmers who have farm stands, and groups like ours who represent farmers. Then there are land use groups, there are state agencies, there are county planners. There's a lot of folks on this committee. So what is the committee covering? They have 5 topics that they have said they would like to address during this rulemaking. The first one, which was the focus of the meeting on Friday, is the primary use test. So that is something that's built in because farm stands are different than agritourism. They're governed by different statutes. And farm stands are an outright permitted use of EFU and farm forest zone land because selling the products of the farm is considered a farm use. So that means that there is kind of this primary use test, like, is this land being used for farming, or is it only being used for a farm stand or selling? And that is also the primary use test also includes, like, is that farm stand, is that retail space primarily for selling the products of the farm and agricultural products of the local farm area. And right now there's a 25% incidental items cap. So 25% of your sales can come from non-farm incidental items. And that 75% is supposed to be products from your farm and like agricultural products from the local area. There was a lot of conversation about what local area means in the meeting last week. The next thing that will be discussed is promotional activities outside and inside the farm stand. Like, does it matter if you're hosting an event to promote the products that you sell or the agriculture that you're doing inside the building or outside the building? This has been a point of contention in like some counties are permitting people to do one thing and some another, and there needs to be clarification. Also, the really fee-based activities outside of promotion, so educational opportunities that you are charging a fee for and what is allowed and what is not allowed. Right now, it has to be completely promotional. So you need to be like anything you're charging a fee for needs to be promoting the use or sale of your product. And so if you're having an educational opportunity, teaching someone about the type of agriculture that you do, some practice that you use on the farm, or something like that that is not like you're promoting the type of agriculture you do, not necessarily the product that you're producing, and education in that way. That is not something that's currently allowed under farm stands. You could get an agritourism permit to do that. That's where this gets fuzzy, is that there are technically other ways to do this, but should it be allowed under farm stands? Prepared foods with a direct tie to the farm operation and local agricultural area. This is talking about things beyond what is currently allowed from the farm direct producer process exemption and cottage food law, which is like the home baking bill plus that was with the things that were passed in 2023. So there are quite a few prepared or processed foods like jam, pickles, all of that that are outright allowed under the farm direct producer process bill and the cottage food law, but we're talking about prepared foods, so like ready to eat food that has a direct tie-in, which is also not clearly defined to the farm operation. Apparently there is inconsistency in enforcement across the state, across counties, about what that means for farm stands and what should be allowed and what should not be allowed, because restaurants are not an allowable use of farmland. So EFU zoning does not allow for restaurants. So like, how do we approach this prepared food thing? Um, Also impacts on neighboring farms and cumulative impact of multiple permits. So that's something, these are the topics that have been identified in the DLCD rulemaking that we're going to be talking about over the course of the 4 RAC meetings and the meeting in September where they'll present the draft rules. So if you want to engage in this conversation with FOF, we would love, part of our role as being on the rack is that we are supposed to bring our community into this conversation and to make ourselves a mouthpiece for what our farmers want in this conversation, because not everybody can sit in these 3-hour meetings all the time. That's my job, thank God. Everyone doesn't have to do it, but we are in charge of gathering input from our base about what you think on these topics. I know that there is a diversity of opinion on agritourism in FOF space, and we want to make sure that the way that we're presenting FOF's ideas is in line with what folks are telling us. So we will be hosting some office hours throughout the RAC process to try to inform the comments that we're making both in writing and in the meetings. And so tomorrow at 3 p.m., we are going to be talking about the primary use test, and some questions here that we've been talking about based on the conversation that happened on Friday. Because the way that it works is that the RAC meeting happens. We say our piece, we all have a conversation, and then we have a week to submit written comments to DLCD as RAC members to be considered in the record. And so my job is to now bring what I think is right and what happened in the RAC to my community, talk to you all, get ideas, and bring that to you into some comments by the end of the week to submit to DLCD to put on the record. And then we will also be meeting next Thursday, the 29th, in preparation for the June 3rd meeting. Based on what I know about the June 3rd meeting, I want to get some information up front. Then we will be meeting on Monday, June 16th, because there is another meeting on June 24th. And to discuss the prepared food and impact statement. These are laid out in the RAC calendar, like what we will need to talk about at each meeting. And then Monday, July 14th will be the final office hours for the FOF community. So these events that are on the screen right now are just for the FOF community. If you're a farmer, if you're a farm stand operator, if you're looking to get into this and you want to have your voice heard in this process, we this is where we're going to be talking as a small farm community. So bring any unanswered questions or final comments to the July 14th that you want included in FOF's comments before the end of the rack period. But if you want to speak on your own behalf and you don't want to go through me, there are also opportunities for public comment. Woohoo! So there is a new thing that DLCD is doing where you can come to the rack meetings and there will be a portion for public comment. I will say that they made it very clear that you are speaking directly to the rack. You are not putting something on the public record when you make comments at the rack meetings. I don't know why they chose to phrase it like that, but June 3rd, June 24th, and July 18th are the dates of the next rack meetings. Get in touch with me and I'll give you the details on where those are. They also should be posted on the DLCD website. They are required to make those public meetings accessible. And then there will also be a public comment period. So after the rack concludes, the last meeting of the rack is July 18th, and then there's not going to be any meetings in August. That's when they're doing the legal review, which means that they'll take everything that they learn, draft something up, and then send it through legal review. And and then in September they will be presenting the draft rules and then public comment will open. So September 23rd is when that meeting is going to be happening. I think the RAC members are invited to that too. They emphasize that date a lot. And then through early November, there will be a public comment period where you can see like kind of the conclusions that they came to, and you can say on the record, this is good or this is bad, or you misinterpreted this, or this will hurt me, or this will help me. So if you are a farm stand operator or wish to be, I would highly encourage you to get involved in this process and make sure, because their rulemaking can be just as impactful to your operation as new legislation. So I just want to make sure that the public comment and ability and ways to get involved for this farm stand and agritourism conversation were clear to everyone, because we've heard a lot that this is a really, really important topic. Yes, look out for notifications from FOF. Brittany put in the chat that she will be sending out those dates and everything. I also sent them to the Farming for the Future working group. I sent calendar invites to the Farming for the Future working group at OCFSN if you're a part of that. Yeah, so that's all I have for you. So we can stop the recording.